Chapter 17 left us off with their roles. Kira can see the future. That is part of being able to see what she can do. She can see the future. Um, Maddie obviously can fix things, he can heal things. And if you're confused about what Jonas can do in seeing beyond, he does not see the future. He can see things in the present that take place far away. So I don't know if you call that clairvoyance. I think clairvoyance is the ability to see things that are present tense in a faraway location. He does not see the future. That is what she sees. So she in chapter 17 does see that leader is coming for them to find them and help them out. I'm going to read chapter 18 real quick too. Chapter 18 is only one page. It's a real quick one. We're almost finished with the book. The blind man was alone now with his fear since leader had gone. He had returned to his house to wait, passing as he did the workers still preparing to build a wall around the surrounding village. In the yard beside the small home place he had shared happily with Maddie for so long, he could smell the newly turned earth. Yesterday he had begun to dig a flower garden for his daughter, pushing in the spade and loosening the weeds for pulling. Jean had stopped by to ask about Maddie. She had admired Sear's work and told him she would bring seeds from her own flowers. They could have twin gardens, she said. She was looking forward to meeting the blind man's daughter. She'd never had a big sister. Perhaps Kira would be that for her. He could hear the smile in her voice. But that was yesterday. He had told Jean then, believing to be true, that travelers were fine. They were on their way home. This morning, leader, after standing motionlessly at the window for a long time, he told him the truth. The blind man had cried out in anguish. Both of them? Both of my children? Ordinarily, leader needed to rest after he looked beyond. Now he did not take the time. The blind man could hear him moving about the room, gathering things. Don't let village know that I'm gone, leader told him. Gone? Where are you going? The blind man was still reeling with the news of what was happening in Forest. To save them, of course, but I don't trust the wall builders. If they realize I'm not here to remind everyone of the proclamation, they're going to start early. I don't want to get back here and not be able to re-enter. Can you slip past them? Yes, I know a back way, and they're all so absorbed in their work they won't be looking for me. I'm the last person they want to see anyway. That's how they know how I feel about the wall. The blind man was encouraged, out of his despair, by the optimism in leader's voice. To save them, of course. He had said that. Maybe it could be true. Do you have food? A warm jacket? Weapons? Maybe you'll need weapons. I hate the thought of it. Leader said no. Our gifts are our weaponry. Then he hurried down the stairs. Now, alone in his home place, a feeling of hopelessness returned to the blind man. He reached for the wall beside the kitchen. He felt the edges of the tapestry hanging there, the one Kira had made for him. He let his fingers creep across it. He felt their way through the embroidered landscape. He had felt the tiny, even stitches often before, because he went to it and touched it when he was missing her. Now, on this shattered morning, he felt nothing but knots and snarls under his fingertips. He felt death and smelled its terrible death. Okay, that was chapter 18. So leader is going to head out to try to find them. I'm also now going to read chapter 19. It is also an incredibly short chapter. Night was ending and they were still alive. Maddie woke at dawn to find himself still curled next to Kira in the place where they had collapsed together after struggling as far as they could into the evening. Kira? His voice was hoarse from thirst. She heard him and stirred. She opened her eyes. I can't see very well, she whispered. Everything is blurred. Can you sit up, he asked. She tried and groaned. I am so weak, she said. Wait. She took a deep breath and then painfully pushed herself into a sitting position. What's that on your face? She asked him. He touched his upper lip where she pointed and brought his hand away smeared with bright blood. My nose is bleeding, he said, puzzled. She handed him the cloth she had worn around her face the day before. He held it against his nose to try to stem the flow of blood. Do you think you can walk? He asked her after a moment. She shook her head. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mattie." He wasn't surprised. After the thorny branches had shredded her dress, they had reached for her legs as night fell. Now he could see that she was terribly lacerated. The wounds were deep. He could see exposed muscles and tendons glisten yellow and pink in a devastating kind of beauty, where the ragged flesh gaped open. Matty himself could probably still stumble along, but his arms were completely useless now. His hands seemed no more than huge paws. He could no longer even hold the knife with any strength. As for Frolic, he didn't know. The little dog lay motionless against his chest. He watched dully as a brown lizard with a darting tongue scrambled across their blanket with its tail flicking. "You go on," Kira murmured. She lay back down and closed her eyes. "I'm just going to sleep." He moved his damaged arms with some difficulty to her pack, which lay beside her where she had dropped it the night before. Through a haze of pain, he realized his fingers still moved awkwardly at his will. He used them to open her pack and remove the embroidery frame. Painstakingly slowly, he threaded her needle, and then he shook her awake. "Don't. I don't want to wake up." "Kira," he said to her, "take this." He handed her the frame. "Try one more time, please. See where Leader is if you can." She blinked and looked at the frame as if it were unfamiliar. Matty put the threaded needle into her hand. He was remembering something. It was something he had once said to Leader about meeting halfway. But she had closed her eyes again. He spoke loudly to her. "Kira, put the needle in the fabric and try to meet him. Try, Kira." Kira sighed, and with a feeble gesture she inserted the needle into the cloth as he held the frame. He watched her hands. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. "Again," he implored. He saw her hands flutter, and the shimmer came. Leader felt Forrest's attack begin when he was 2 days in. Probably it had started earlier with sharp twigs. He remembered now that one had barely missed his eye. He had been so intent then on finding and following the path, he had not paid attention to the little wounds inflicted on him. He had strode through the deep woods with no thought of danger. He concentrated only on finding the pair he had been so close, seen so close to death. He did not eat or sleep. He began to perceive the stench on the morning of the second day. It served to hurry his steps. Without flinching, he brushed aside the grasping branches. He ignored the thorns that scraped his arms and face. He encountered a place where the path seemed simply to end. He stopped, puzzled, and examined the undergrowth. From somewhere nearby, a shiny green frog emerged from the base of a bush. Chirrump, chirrump. It hopped and skittered toward him in the mud. It turned itself around and went forward. To his surprise, Leader followed the frog, pushing his way through the thick bushes. It found it had led him to the place where the path resumed. Relieved, he had thought briefly that he was lost. He continued on, but now he recognized the attacks. He saw it was not random thorny branches and his own clumsiness in walking into them. It was an assault from Forrest itself. Suddenly the air surrounding him was abuzz with stinging insects. They flew at his face and bit him mercilessly. He remembered from his reading descriptions of besieged medieval castles and armies of men with bows sending so many arrows, the sky seemed thick with them. This felt like that. He was pierced in 1,000 places, and he cried out. Then, just as suddenly, they were gone, regrouping, he thought, for another attack. He rushed forward, thinking to move away from this swampy area which harbored and bred such creatures. Indeed, the path did turn, and it led to drier ground. But here a sharp rock flung itself up and split the skin of his knee. Then another sliced his hand so badly he had to wrap the cut tightly in cloth for fear of the loss of blood that would weaken him beyond repair. Stumbling and bleeding, he wished briefly he had brought a weapon. But what would have protected him against Forrest itself? It was a force too huge to fight with a knife or club. Our gifts are our weaponry, he remembered saying to the blind man. It seemed so long ago he had said it. He had felt certain of it at the time. Now he could not even think what it had meant. He stood silently for a moment. His face was disfigured now, swollen from the bites that oozed dark fluid. Blood ran from his left ear. It had been gashed by a razor-sharp stone. One of his ankles was entangled by a vine that grew so quickly he could see it move, snaking its way toward his knee. He knew he would soon be immobilized by it, and the insects would return then to finish him off. He faced what he knew to be the center of the forest, the place where Maddie and Kira were trapped. He willed himself to look beyond. It seemed the only thing left to do. There's 2 chapters left in the story. I'm just going to tell you guys, I think I'm going to record them today because I don't know if I can put the story down at this point. Hopefully, I'll put these on YouTube and then I'll come back and read the last 2.